Hello to everyone and a very warm welcome. This is part two, obviously, of our little sojourn into Ignatius of Antioch and some of the material that we have on him and his letters and what they say. Just a quick recap. Yeah, he's a very early church father, probably writing in about the 110s to as late as 150, and I've even heard later estimates than that for his letters. Now, we don't know whether Ignatius even wrote these letters, and we definitely know for sure that some of the epistles that come from him don't actually come from him at all. They're going to be later fraud material created by the church, scribes, and so on. So we're gonna, just let's get going, but we have to maintain an air of suspicion when talking about Ignatius, and I hope that people will have some question marks in their minds given what we talked about in part one. Okay, so here we go. Ignatius, if indeed it's even him writing his material, is most definitely rallying against some considerably powerful belief systems, which saw Jesus not in the light the canonical Gospels present, and the vehement insistence he employs in forcing his message is quite apparent, indeed palpable. To recap, in the earliest extant copies of Ignatius' three-letter collection, that of Romans, Ephesians, and Polycarp, and the letter to Polycarp, he tells us no clear nativity narrative. He states only that Jesus was born and that Mary was a virgin. We hear no sayings from the mouth of Jesus, and we hear nothing of the trial, crucifixion, or resurrection, neither the ascension. We hear only allusions to a cross. What's also of import is we hear no mention of Paul's epistles, though he does get praiseworthy mention along with Peter, and in places he even contradicts Paul. In short, we have no knowledge of the New Testament in any detail in Ignatius' three-letter collection, a potential sign they hadn't fully come into existence yet. It is often remarked that the time period most likely identified for the composition of these letters was one in which a veritable propaganda war between literal Christians and Gnostics of various distinctions was underway, and these letters can easily be referred to as pseudepigraphal, i.e. not by the writer put forward, written as late as around 170 CE. With earlier dates being around the 110s or 120s. It is impossible to know exactly, but the decades towards the later dates are likely more reliable. The point is that the early Christians, given the lack of tangible evidence refuting this, were clearly more inclined towards the type of Christianity we have already witnessed from the writings of Paul, Hebrews, and Clement of Rome, who evidently knew nothing of the Orthodox gospel tradition. Incidentally, this is the first time in history we see, besides the Gospels, anyone named Pilate, Mary, or Joseph in the story of Jesus. So his work is important in that it does relay some information, at least a tiny remnant of information that we do get in the later gospel traditions. But remember well that the myriad of stories in the gospels are just not present in Ignatius, and that should cause us to view this whole saga with some suspicion. Obviously, Ignatius would have known certain aspects of Jesus' story. He apparently writes, even if we take the three letters most likely to be his, they still contain not very much. And there are some, these are letters of some size. Going back to my work, one other curious feature of the Ignatian letters is that they seem to refer to gospel passages that do not resemble anything in the Gospels, which in their own right actually accord more with Gnostic literature. Ignatius writes, "Now the virginity of Mary was hidden from the prince of this world, as was also her offspring and the death of the Lord. 3 mysteries of renown, which were wrought in silence by God. How then was he manifested to the world? A star shone forth in heaven above all the other stars, the light of which was inexpressible, while its novelty struck men with astonishment, and all the rest of the stars, with the sun and moon, formed a chorus to this star, and its light was exceedingly great above them all. And there was agitation felt as to whence this new spectacle came, so unlike everything else above. Hence, every kind of magic was destroyed, and every bond of wickedness disappeared. Ignorance was removed, and the old kingdom abolished, when God appeared in human form for the renewal of eternal life. It's letter to the Ephesians, chapter 19. The reference to a star as a manifestation of Jesus, that as a star shone forth in heaven above all the other stars, seems to put Jesus up in the heavens again, where he likely belongs. Again, though, Ignatius knows of no nativity, not the story of Matthew, not the story of Matthew's Jesus. And Carrier explains this gospel that Ignatius is describing has the very birth and death of Jesus being hidden from the world, as revealed only in the bright light demonstrated, his triumph, which could only be at his resurrection, and that was the event that granted men eternal life. Such a spectacle could hardly have been kept hidden from the prince of this world. It therefore must have followed and not preceded the death of Jesus. Also, in this mysterious gospel, not only the virginity of Mary, but even the identity of Jesus was also kept from both public and demonic knowledge until after his death, a fact that doesn't even fit the narrative of Mark, much less the other gospels we know. Recall the identification of princes of the world and the meaning they conveyed in Paul, not to earthly rulers, but to princes or archonic forces, or cosmocrators and so on, that occupy the level of the firmament in Hebrew cosmology. We will see even in Ignatius, the arch-literalist, the remnant of this Gnostic heresy. Why is it that even an heresiologist is using the language of the Gnostics to make his arguments? This is reasonably good evidence that even in Ignatius' time, which admittedly straddles a few decades at the time of the writing of these epistles, around the time of so you understand what I mean there. The epistle writers were likely the first writers of anything Christian that we have. And they're not the gospel accounts, they're much more mystical. But this guy straddles that time period likely fairly neatly, but though it's still probable that a lot of the epistle writers came a little earlier, there still did not appear to be a definitive set of gospels, and that the 4 canonical gospels could quite credibly have only been written and codified after this point, relegating completely the notion of the first century canonical gospel tradition to the realm of pure speculation, as it's likely that had they existed, Ignatius would have known them, or at least known some of the stories in them. Any Jesus story, any miracle, any nature miracle, anything like this. Of course, there's nothing there. Scholarship on this question is adapting to new finds, and it's indeed becoming easier to push them back into the 2nd century with greater ease, much to the anger of traditional Christians, whose only means of arguing earlier dates rely on speculation. So that's it, really. That's what we have. Ignatius is, feel free to read the Ignatian letters. They are, kind of cliff note, and they're creedal. They talk about a very mystical Jesus. You'll read them, I'm sure, read them yourselves. They don't really talk much about an historical character in any fleshy respect. Ignatius is just saying, believe, 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 believe. You must believe. If you don't believe, you're a terrible Christian. Indeed, you're not a Christian and you're destined for hell. This is not particularly helpful if you're trying to be a good Christian and you want to believe in the physical Jesus Christ. But this is what we have, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed that little, this last video here. We're going to move on to Clement probably tomorrow, and hopefully you'll enjoy that as well. Clement comes just before Ignatius. But yeah, we have the same issues really come up. The mystical Jesus based on the Old Testament. And so yeah, I'll sign off here. See you on the flip side. Take care, guys. Have a nice day. Love you all. Bye-bye.